So we're in this question as to what happens if we misdate a bill of divorce. And remember, we've learned, according to Beit Hillel, that a an old get is an old bill of divorce is not valid. And we're going to find now in the middle of the eighth chapter about what happens if we do try to perform a divorce with a misdated instrument. But in order to understand that, we need to just take a little segue out and go back to Yevamot. Go back to the tractate of Yevamot and just revisit a Mishnah at the beginning of the 10th chapter about a woman whose husband went abroad. Isha shehalach ba'ala li medinat hayam. He went to a country beyond the sea, and people came and they said to her, "Your husband's died." And so she remarries. So she thinks her husband's dead, and she remarries, and then her husband returns. So she's in this awful situation where she's married to two people. And the Mishnah in Yevamot in the 10th chapter explains that she needs a get from both of them. But she is in a terrible situation. She doesn't have a ketubah or maintenance from either of them. If she's taken any property from them, she has to return it to them. Essentially, she gets no benefit from either marriage, and a child from either of them could be a mamzer. So that's the halacha we learned in the Mishnah of Yevamot about this woman who's stuck in a position of being married to two people. So let's just keep that in. It's a tragic situation. And let's just keep that in mind and now come back to Gittin. So the Mishnah in Gittin now. So we're in the fifth Mishnah of the eighth chapter. Katav l'shem malchut she'ena hogenet. If the get was dated on a kingdom that wasn't fit for purpose, l'shem malchut Madai u'l'shem malchut Yavan, levinyan habayit u'l'churban habayit. If it was dated by the emperor of the Medes, by the empire of Greece, by the building of the temple, by the destruction of the temple. Now, of course, none of this makes intuitive sense to us because we're very used to dates now that are all, well, we all run dates out of the common era, and we all know that, for example, this year is 2025, and there's no argument about it. But in the time of the Mishnah, you would date dates with reference to the ruler, the then ruler of the time. So you'd begin with the first year of the king, whatever, and then the second year of the king, whatever. And then when you had a new king, you'd restart counting at one. So calendars, in terms of annual calendars, would vary from kingdom to kingdom. And then they would reset themselves when there was a new government. And when the Mishnah talks about drawing a date on Malchut She'ena Hogenet, that gets dated by an unfit kingdom. I mean, maybe this is a reference to Rome, but most likely it's a reference to the fact that in terms of the practice of the Gemara, they always want to use a current calendrical system. So the get has to be dated by whatever civil authority we are in. It can't be dated by some other reference. It has to be dated by an accepted civil authority that produces its own calendar. Otherwise, it's not correct. And similarly, Hayav Mizrach v'katav v'ma'arav. If maybe he's in the east, that means actually in Babylon, but he wrote in the west. Maybe he's in the west, but he wrote in the west will be in Palestine, but he wrote in the east. In other words, the get is improper. But the woman receives this get and she then goes and remarries with it. So she's divorced with an improper document and she remarries. And the expression "and she remarries" is not in the Mishnah. The Mishnah just talks about these dates or locations, but it continues, Teitzei mizeh umizeh, tzricha get mizeh umizeh. She must leave both of them, and she requires a get from both of them. This is an absolute parallel to the woman in Yevamot who thinks that her husband is dead and has remarried, and then he comes back. This is the get that she thought worked, but it doesn't work. And she remarries. And she's caught. We see, by the way, why the rabbis are so anxious about bills of divorce, because she's caught in exactly the same tragic situation that is described in that Mishnah in Yevamot. It's almost as if the Mishnah here is a copy paste of the language which we saw over there. She has no ketubah, no fruits. If she owns property coming into the marriage, then she also owns all the fruits of that property during the marriage. No maintenance, her husband has to maintain her. No clothing, her husband has to keep her in nice clothes. From either husband, either the old one or the new one. If she's taken anything from either of them, she must return it. In other words, she has no benefit from either marriage. And the child from either one of them is a mamzer. Well, we can understand that the child from the second marriage is a mamzer. The Mishnah seems to be saying that if the first husband takes her back, say she gets a get from the second husband and the first one takes her back, then this child will also be a mamzer, because the second marriage is not a marriage. I think that's why. Neither one may impurify himself for her. So, for example, a kohen would sacrifice his purity for a dead wife, but not in this case. ולא וזה זקין לה. וזה זקין לא במצותה ולא במעשה ידיה ולא בהפקר נדריה. Neither of them has a right to whatever she may find. We learnt in the Mishnah of Ketubot that the husband, any property that the woman finds is in the domain of her husband, and the work of her hands is in the domain of her husband. He can annul her vows. None of this works. She's not married. If she was the daughter of an Israelite, she becomes disqualified from marrying a priest. She's no longer considered to be okay to marry a priest. Uvat Levi min hamaser, if she's a daughter of a Levi, she can't eat maser, she can't eat tithes, because she's kind of half married but not married, so she's left the house. And if the daughter of the priest, she can't eat truma. Uvat kohen min truma. If she's a daughter of a priest, she's no longer pure, she can't eat truma. Ein yorshav zelazeh veyorshav zelazeh. So ein yorshav shelazeh veyorshav shelazeh yorshin ktubata. So normally, if she dies, her heirs would inherit the ketubah, but it doesn't work. She doesn't have the right to the ketubah, and the heirs don't either. Meitu. And if the husbands die, let's say they die childless, then the daughters of the brothers of both of them are going to perform chalitza, but they're not going to perform yibum, because again, she's not married. She's not married. She's sufficiently married that they have to perform chalitza, but not sufficiently married that they can perform yibum. And if his name, if his name, or Shina Shmo Ushma V'Shem Iro V'Shem Ira. If his name or her name, or the name of his town, or the name of her town, was wrong in the get. So in other words, if a small but crucial detail of the get is incorrect, exactly the same applies. She must leave both of them, i.e., if she remarried, she has to leave, she has to dissolve that marriage. And all of these things apply to her. In other words, if there's anything wrong with that bill of divorce, then she's caught in this tragic situation just as much as if she'd been told that her husband was dead and had remarried.